going, Yankee fans? Welcome back to Fireside Yankees with your boys, Alex and Ryan. Today we're talking about 5 players who will likely not be on this Yankee team. Now, guys, we are depressed, we are sad, we are upset. Any synonym of freaking miserable that you can come up with, we are that, and I'm sure you're feeling the same way. And we really want this team to turn around. We want this team to actually find its groove again. We want to win some games. How about that? Miami Marlins, they've lost 5 of their last 7. The Yankees can beat the Miami Marlins. Now, it really depends. Can our guys hit? And that's a big what if. But I'll tell you what, right now there's a couple players who have basically played their way off the team, if not played at all. Like, they haven't even made an appearance this year. I'm looking at Frankie Montas as one of them. Now, general manager Brian Cashman last year had probably one of the worst off seasons. Like in 2022, had one of the worst off seasons and trade deadlines that I think I've ever seen. Like, straight up, I don't think that you could literally do anything else and it would have been better than what he did last year. You know, the Josh Donaldson acquisition, IKF, Ben Wortfed, and really, look, IKF's been fine. Like, the actual pieces exchanged, Gary Sanchez, Gio Urshela, like, it was a wash in terms of player talent, but it's the $50 million freaking dollars that he brought on with Josh Donaldson's contract when the Yankees were trying to pinch pennies at the freaking deadline because they didn't want to add any money because we were paying to. It all comes to, like, accumulation here, and Josh Donaldson's contract is still going to be killing us next year when he has a $6 million buyout option, and they're paying him $6 million just to not be on the freaking team. Money well spent, in my opinion, by the way. But Ryan, when you're looking at Josh Donaldson, who's definitely, this is the first guy we're going to talk about. He's gone. He's done. He's off the team, never to be seen again. This money that opens up, how important is it to retooling, restructuring, and what do you think it needs to be applied? Because ultimately, I'm looking at the outfield. You know, if Cody Bellinger, like, you got to find a center fielder. If Everson Pereira's not going to be, maybe he's a left fielder for us. Who knows? How do you think the Yankees kind of turn this Josh Donaldson situation into a positive next season?
Yeah, so there's a lot that the Yankees are going to have to, kind of relook at or reevaluate on their roster, not just on the roster, from a process standpoint. As you mentioned, how is it that you end up with the highest paid position player group in the league at north of $150 million and end up with one of the 10 worst position player groups in the league, right? The Yankees are, scheduled to have, or not scheduled, they're on pace to have one of their worst offenses, since the early 2010s, 2013, 2014, those times where, it was an older core and it was an aging core and it was just, these guys aren't very good anymore. That's the same spot we're in. And, the difference is that, back then the Yankees didn't have an Aaron Judge or a Garrett Cole, right? This time they do. So, it's to a greater detriment to not have that level of talent surrounding these two players. Josh Donaldson leaving is obviously going to be, a nice free up of salary. It's going to be a way for the Yankees to, kind of reset at the third base position. There are 2 third basemen on the free agent market who are having pretty good years, so the Yankees are probably going to look at, and that's Heimer Candelario and Matt Chapman. We'll see how they look in terms of, the rest of the season, but most importantly, if they stay with their ball clubs, that's obviously a big thing. Like, do they get an extension? Who knows? But overall, like, man, the Yankees have a lot they have to do from the position player side of things. Who from their farm are they going to rely upon, right? Like, is Oswald Peraza going to ever get a shot starting the infield? I'm not sure. Is Everson Pereira getting that call up this year? Apparently he should be. Is Jason Dominguez, like, what's his ETA, right? Like, a lot of these things are going to affect what the Yankees do, their decision making. Obviously in the SNY report, it had kind of referenced or not hinted, I think it flat out said that the Yankees didn't go out and get somebody in, like, a Tommy Pham because they wanted to have Pereira be that guy. So that tells you, like, hey,
where is he?
Yeah, like, are we trying to be a youth movement? Like, what's really going on here? I think we'll see a lot of players on this team no longer be on the team next year. I think that's for certain. There will be a big roster turnover. And for all of Brian Cashman's faults, in recent years, we've seen him do that, right? We referenced the Josh Donaldson trade. Not only did he get rid of Urshela and Sanchez, he also got rid of Voit that year. Odor was their starting second baseman. Got rid of him. They sat Gleyber Torres for opening day. Like, they're willing to make some pretty big shakeups. But will they be willing to do it again? Number 2. And number 3, can they do it properly? Like, they messed that up. They got rid of a lot of guys and they messed that up. Now they got to get it right this time, and they've got to get it right with what might be a lower payroll, right? Again, I've hinted at this before. I don't think Hal Steinbrenner's too happy with paying $293 million for a team that didn't perform and then being asked to do it again. So I guess the question I have for you, Alex, is, do you look externally or do you look internally if you're replacing a guy like Josh Donaldson, who quite frankly didn't give you anything this year?
Well, I would say we should look internally, but we don't want to give Oswald Peraza any actual playing time at third base, at least enough to justify a sample size of offensive production or see what he can do. We know he's an elite defensive player. like this is something that we've known about Oswald Peraza for a long time, but we've diminished his value significantly. I think that there are positions we can look to internally to replace these guys. I don't think that third base is one of them right now. Trey Sweeney could be that guy in the future, but I just don't think I think it's too soon to consider him as a long-term option there. And then, I think Peraza would be fine to utilize, but I think that he actually is falling more into a utility role. I think they'd rather have DJ LeMahieu start at third base than Peraza start at third base. I don't know why. It just is what it is. I think that maybe Peraza comes and plays that utility kind of role that DJ LeMahieu has played. And if DJ has to go play first base for whatever reason, Peraza could play third. And maybe that's the role they go with him. And that's how they utilize his value. I think the outfield has a lot more internal options. You're seeing a lot of guys that are rising through the system pretty quickly. Pereira's ready. He's ready to be called up. He should be called up any day. And then you have Jason Dominguez, who's going to be in AAA soon, hopefully. Hopefully they promote him over the next couple of weeks. That would be a good move for him to get some action, maybe even compete during spring training. Maybe he gets another 15 games or so under his belt in AAA, and then he gets to transition. We'll see how that develops, though. It probably needs a little bit more time. And then you have guys like Spencer Jones, who is also prime for a promotion. So, I'm excited to see how these prospects continue to develop. I think Pereira's the most MLB-ready talent that we have right now, and he's a guy that we could look internally in the outfield. But that brings me to another position here, and that's center field with Harrison Bader. Harrison Bader's probably gone, and for good reason. Despite his defensive value, he's just an inconsistent offensive player. He's inconsistent when it comes to health. His durability issues. He's hitting 265 this year with a 300 OBP, a 95 WRC plus, and his injuries, they're just too much to consider at this point. I just don't think he's played over 100 games once in the last 4 years. You need guys who are going to play baseball. You can't always be investing in injury-prone players. And, I think you let Harrison Bader walk and you take as much money as you can save and you invest it right into a guy like Cody Bellinger, he's going to be expensive, but he's young. He can play center field. He has long-term prospects as a first baseman once Anthony Rizzo's gone. Maybe Jason Dominguez gets the call-up, takes over in center, and they move Bellinger to first base. That's totally reasonable to think about. And Pereira fills in that third at left field for what it's worth. I think that right now I could see Bellinger being a really nice long-term piece as a player who could play first and the outfield. And I think that defensively he's been a good player for a very long time. Offensively, we know what he's capable of, and he's young. He has a lot of time left to be a really good player in the MLB. So, Ryan, when you're looking at what the Yankees can do in center field, moving on from Harrison Bader, I feel like that's probably the best option at this point in time, and maybe taking that money and going in the direction of Bellinger and then calling up a prospect.
Yeah, so, I think that Cody Bellinger would be a great fit for the Yankees. I'm not sure what the money looks like, right? That obviously matters. If he gets $200 million, then, a little bit harder to justify paying Cody Bellinger, especially considering the Yankees' track record with those type of contracts. That isn't suggesting the Yankees shouldn't pay big contracts, just that, Bellinger's got a little bit of a spottier track record. So I'm not too keen on the Yankees absolutely must go out and get Cody Bellinger, but he is a great fit for the reasons you mentioned. Can play first base, can play the outfield. The question with signing any outfielder right now is, let's say the Yankees are moving towards a youth movement and are trying to get younger and are trying to rely a little bit more on their farm system. Does it make a lot of sense for them to go out and get an outfielder and extend them long-term, or does it make more sense for them to get a one-year guy? Pereira's supposed to be here this year, so I'll at least see him. You're supposed to see Dominguez next year. I think it's fair to say you will. He's played really well in Double-A in the second half. The Yankees like his process at the plate. I love his process at the plate. I think he's very disciplined, has really good power, great speed, all those things. I don't know if he'll be a center fielder. I think Pereira's going to be the center fielder, but, it's not a problem to have multiple really good outfielders on your team. End of the day, prospects are just prospects. And the way I look at it is the Yankees should get an outfielder this offseason. And the guy I kind of like a lot is Jung-Hoo Lee. He's coming from the KBO. We tweeted about him. I think you tweeted out that graphic yesterday, and I'm working on an article about him. I just don't think Harrison Bader is a fit. I like Harrison Bader a lot. I think he's actually a pretty good center fielder, all things considered. But all of his problems are offensively. And where do the Yankees struggle? Offensively. He's a defense-first guy on a team that can't hit. That's a team problem. It's kind of like Jose Trevino, right? Jose Trevino's problem isn't that he can't, it is a problem that he can't hit, but it isn't the Yankees' problem. The Yankees' problem is that they can't put hitters around him. So, he worked well in last year's team when it was a deeper lineup. This year's team, not as deep. So, I think he'll have a lot of value in the market. It's just not for the New York Yankees.
Yeah, that's kind of the truth is he'll have value, but we just have too many guys who can't We just can't roll with the durability issues, in my opinion. Now, looking at another guy with durability issues, honestly, two of them. We'll look at two starting pitchers: Severino and Frankie Montas. Montas, another absolute bust, for Cashman and trading players. But Montas, 30 years old, shoulder injury, 6.35 ERA over 39.2 innings of the Yankees last year. Hasn't pitched a freaking inning this season. I actually think that there's a world where we see the Yankees bring Montas back on a really cheap deal. I think that there's a world where they are like, okay, you know what, we stuck it through. He's looking good. His bullpen sisters are looking fine. Let's bring him back and see what he can do. But you bring him back with the intention of him not being a key player in your rotation. Like, he is a back end. Like, he's filling Domingo Germán's spot type of thing. That's kind of how I feel about Frankie Montas right now. I think there is a world where we bring him back cheap, but Severino, on the other hand, I think it's time to cut ties. Like, it's too little, it's too late. 8 ERA this year. His confidence is shot. Everything about him is just not looking like a pitcher we can rely on in the future. Love the guy. Wish he panned out. The injuries destroyed his career, but the pitch quality is really, really poor. Ryan, when you're looking at Frankie Montas, looking at Severino, what are your thoughts right now on those two? Because right now I'm thinking, they're probably both gone, but I could see the Yankees bringing Montas back on a cheap contract.
Yeah, so I kind of view Frankie Montas as a different type of trade bust than the other ones, right? Like, Joey Gallo, he played and he struggled, right? Like, it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of what happened. The difference with Montas is he just got hurt, and that's kind of what it feels like. It feels like he just got hurt. And it doesn't really feel like he necessarily got a chance to either prove himself as good or bad. His stuff is pretty good. We'll have to see what it looks like when it comes back. But if the Yankees were to bring him on a cheap deal, it adds a starter to the rotation. They have guys like Vasquez, Brito. You don't really know what the availability of Germán looks like. I'm not going to pencil him in for the roster until, end of the day, baseball should not be his priority right now. I pray for him and his family, for him to get better, all that stuff. But you can't really pencil him into the rotation. There are other guys, Will Warren, Richard Fitz, Chase Hampton, who shouldn't be too far away. Drew Thorpe recently got a promotion to AA, so there are internal options, but overall, it doesn't really feel like the Yankees, should be afraid of giving Montas 1 year. Like, worst case scenario, he sucks or he gets hurt and, you just replace him with someone else at the deadline or internally. I like the progression we've seen from Clark Schmidt. I think Rodon will be better next year. Cortez looked really good in his return back. Cole is Garrett Cole, right? Like, I think that's actually a really good rotation. So, yeah, I'd bring him back.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that for a cheap deal, why not? It can't hurt to bring in a guy that, it was good, had an injury, now he's coming off of it, see what he could do. And the last guy that I have here on this list is Kyle Higashioka. I think it's time that we replace him. 33 years old, below average defensive catcher, below average offensive catcher. I feel like if you're going to go with Ben Warfed, you got Carlos Narvaez, you have Augustin Ramirez climbing through the system. I think it's still too early for him. You got Austin Wells, for God's sake. If you're going to go with a young guy, if you're going to go with someone with actual upside, make the change. Let's move on from Kyle Higashioka. I think it's time. What do you think about him? Because I feel like the time is over. He's just not that good.
Yeah, Kyle Higashioka is a weird case. Kyle Higashioka is he's a good defender. Kyle Higashioka has value to a major league ball club. But is it the Yankees, right? The real big issue here is that him and Trevino both hit lefties better than righties. So it's really hard to platoon them. Obviously, you have Warfed up right now. Warfed hasn't hit either side of the plate, so you can't really say you're platooning him with anybody. You have Austin Wells, but, are you going to replace Jose Trevino with Austin Wells? The question really is, what does Jose Trevino look like when he comes back from injury? Even if he is what he was this year, I think you take that over Kyle Higashioka as your backup catcher just because of the rapport he has with the pitching staff and the fact you'd really only have to play him against lefties if you guys have a guy like Austin Wells or just have a full-time major league catcher who can hit both sides of the plate. Doesn't have to be left-handed or right-handed, just has to be able to hit right-handed pitching. Overall, I think that Kyle Higashioka, I won't be mad if he's here, but I don't think he has to stay. I'm pretty indifferent on this. I don't think he has to go, has to stay, but I do understand your sentiment when it comes to hey, the Yankees should probably, give Austin Wells a shot, or maybe it's, who knows, maybe at some point it's Augustin Ramirez, but, Trevino as the backup or as a starter, that makes sense. Higashioka, his situation is a little bit more in flux.
Yeah, look, I'm just willing to give guys an upside at this point. I just, Garrett Cole doesn't use Kyle Higashioka. He's been using Warfed and Trevino. Feel like it's time for a change there, and what's the harm? The downside is pretty minimal, if we're being honest. But guys, we'll love your perspectives on these 5 players. Definitely an interesting bunch, but I think the Yankees are in for a pretty big overhaul of roster this upcoming offseason. There's going to be a lot of changes, and we'll be covering it obviously the rest of the way this regular season and then into the offseason. So we got you guys covered there. Make sure to like and subscribe as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next Fireside Yankees episode.